Hello, everyone. And today we're with Nathan from Stag Fund Management, and he's going to talk to us a little bit about golden visas and his fund that he's looking to talk to you a little bit more about as well. So, Nathan, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me on this presentation, Scott. It's lovely to be here. Looking forward to, of course, sharing some information on our respective flagship fund, the Stag INZ, giving you also some extra added T's and C's about the current landscape of the Portuguese Golden Visa and the fund investment route as a trusted and regulated entity in the business of Portuguese Golden Visa funds.
Great. Good to know. That's going to be a really interesting conversation today. So, what I'd like to do maybe to start off with is to talk a little bit about the golden visa itself, what advantages it has for our clients, what the requirements are, et cetera, et cetera. So, if you could help fill us in on that.
Absolutely. So, I mean, we found ourselves in a fascinating point of time within the migration and global mobility industry in the world. Portugal presents itself in Europe as a top golden visa program, of course, for a number of reasons, but more importantly, the minimum stay requirements of 7 days a year, meaning that that obligation for you to reside on a consistent period is rather, of course, rather light. And then from a commitment point of view and an investment point of view, you have the ability to invest in a private equity or alternative investment fund of your choice, of which there is a colorful display and array of selections of asset classes and opportunities that you can, of course, contribute and participate in. And that's exactly where Stag Fund Management plays a role. So we structure and we have around 20 private equity and venture capital alternative investment funds where we've deployed in excess of 400 million euros. Majority of these funds have very much been designed to agree with the golden visa eligibility conditions. And just to clear that topic up, the assets that are invested cannot be directly or indirectly involved with real estate. And of course, 60% of the allocation of assets needs to be as well in Portugal. The idea really behind the program is to create sustainable growth in economic sectors of Portugal. And of course, the program has been very successful in raising in excess of 7.5 billion euros. So therefore, there's a lot of, I would say, positivity amongst the locals of Portugal, amongst the leadership entities in Portugal to continue to push this initiative and to attract further foreign direct investment as the country has benefited tremendously. So there is plenty of opportunities, in other words, to come. And it certainly has created a wonderful ecosystem in Portugal. And I would like to, of course, have the opportunity to go into some of those details and the funds that you have available to choose from.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Now, just to stick a little bit on what Stag is, I've talked to some other golden visa funds, and every fund requires a fund management to be able to, or a fund manager to look after them to make sure that everything is above board and et cetera. And what Stag is almost like a fund of funds, if you will. Like you're the ones who look after and make sure the other funds are compliant. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you today, because of the fact that this fund of yours is a really interesting one to me, because not only is it your fund, you're also managing other funds to make sure they're compliant. So to me, that gives me more confidence in Stag and the fact that you have the regulatory body around you that allows you to be able to make sure people's money is safe when invested. Is that right?
Absolutely, absolutely. Very, very, very clear, Scott. And I think just in terms of wrapping up and analyzing and really mentioning some of the details that an investor should be paying attention to when, of course, they are looking to make a relative investment is very much in the management entity or the fund management company that is associated with that relative fund. So in this instance, Stag Fund Management is a regulated and licensed entity by the Securities Exchange Market Commission, CMVM, in Portugal. And of course, due to this heavy regulation, it's ensured that, of course, all our strategies All our deployments, all our valuations, and information provided is, of course, thoroughly checked and validated prior to, of course, being released to the public. And of course, based on the fact that we have, as mentioned, raised in excess of 400 million euros deployed across 20 different fund structures, we like to think, of course, that we have a good understanding in terms of what the typical modality of a fund should look like, as well as working within parallel of the law within the Golden Visa eligibility conditions. Now, it does allow us, the Golden Visa does allow us, or in terms of the eligibility conditions, to work in an array of different asset classes, and that can be definitely supported by our portfolio of funds that we manage, which include real estate funds, part of the previous Golden Visa series in 2023. We have as well renewable energy funds, which is, of course, the one that I'll be discussing today. We have agricultural-based funds, which has been rather interesting and has been rather successful as well. Alternative investment funds as well. And last but not least, hospitality. So just from that, you can understand that it is quite a healthy mix of selections that a client or that an investor can assess. And also, you have always the ability to diversify your investments. So this is something that we manage. For example, if a client is interested in 3 or 4 of our funds, us as the fund manager and centralized points of contact can, of course, allocate those funds accordingly that match up with the investor needs. Now, Scott, you mentioned an important point in terms of an interesting scenario where you find a fund manager also having its very own fund, because traditionally fund managers occupy very much an administration-based role, facilitate the structure and the regulation of the fund, and it is supported through an operation company which presents a strategy of a fund, and they are normally responsible as the fund promoters to, of course, attract investment and have the commercial relationship with clients. However, Stag has now internalized that process, and we've created a proprietary set of funds. And this fund in particular is the Stag INZ fund. So I would like to go into a little bit more detail now about this fund. If I've missed anything, then Scott, before I begin, please let me know and I will continue.
Yeah, I can't wait to hear more about this. But initially, what I'd like to do is just discuss a little bit more of the information around the Golden Visa program. So, for example, I understand that there is a concern from people about the potential law changes coming, where they're going from a pathway to citizenship from 5 years to 10 years. And I was wondering, and I know it hasn't been implemented yet. They've tried to pass a law multiple times and it's been, pushed back. But what are your thoughts on this and how it will affect your clients?
Absolutely. No, so it's been a very topical point or discussionary area for the last few months. There has been also a lot of, I would say, postponements, redecisions, which we've had to all deal with collectively, of course, operators and retail involved. With regards to the implications of the program and what is being proposed, of course, there is a 5 to 10 year extension of residency that is being discussed in terms of being eligible for citizenship. Currently, what we have now is 5 years, but they're looking at extending that timeline to 10 years. So that is, I would say, the main change that we're analyzing. Of course, we're not lawyers, so we won't go into all the other caveats and detailing points. However, from a fund perspective or from an investor's perspective, looking to of course, subscribe into a fund, what are the implications of this change? Does it have necessarily a change on, or will it have a consequence on your relative investment? So, fortunately, because the law will be consistent in that 5 years required for permanent residency will remain in place indefinitely. This can, of course, then give comfort that when you do make your investment, the 5 year hold period will still apply, irregardless of if the 5 year changes to 10 years for citizenship. These are two separate matters. Because at the end of the day, the Golden Visa program is a residency program, of course, by investment that has the opportunity to, of course, convert into citizenship. So, with regards to your requirement, again, you will not have to hold the money for longer than, or hold the investment for longer than 5 years. Once you have permanent residency, you can simply, of course, liquidate your investment, and that is no longer required. Of course, we typically do structure funds very much to agree with this timeline. So when we do ordinarily look at a close end, because majority of the funds are close end nature funds, they typically have a duration of 6 to 7 years in total, which allows, of course, for the subscription period, which is generally in the fundraising series of the of the timeline. And then, of course, there's the hold period, which can be no less than 5 years. So typically, as you can imagine, this is why the total duration of the fund is anywhere from 6 to 7 years to allow for successful fundraising and then for the hold period to be completed. So in the final year of the fund, that's normally when the liquidation activities start to take place. And it's at that point then, of course, then you can start to expect that your principal capital, along with accumulated returns, is, of course, returned in due course. So that just, I would say, wraps up the implications of, in a very brief manner, wraps up the implications of course, what is happening in parliamentary and immigration law changes concerned to Portugal. And of course, as you can now understand, it does not have a major bearing on your investment and annual fund managed thereof.
Yes, and it has been passed back and forth multiple times now. So no one's really knows if it's going to be passed or not and what's going on. So at this point in time, I don't know if there's much reason for concern until something happens, you know. So that's great. Well, without further ado, maybe you can tell me a little bit about your fund.
Absolutely. Thank you for the opportunity, Scott. So the Stag INZ is a proprietary fund of Stag Fund Management, and it specializes and operates in renewable energy. The idea behind the fund really is investing in clean tech operating companies in Portugal that ordinarily focus in solar initiatives. So the fund is set up very much to provide finance through a debt equity structure to these relative operating companies that will then install solar panel solutions in their customers' homes, dwellings, or structures, be it if they're a corporate or commercial entity, this can vary. So how the Stag INZ fund operates traditionally is it deploys capital in as far as a shareholder loan to these relative companies, which allows for the financing activity to take place, which is then, of course, utilized to purchase the solar solutions. Once the solar solutions have been purchased, these always remain owned by the fund throughout the whole duration. So just from a risk mitigation perspective, it's important to note. And these solar solutions are then installed in clients' homes. Now, the clients of each and every clean tech operator are, prior to us contracting with them, they have already committed or registered their interest for the solution. So prior to any deployment with any entity, we first require that they have done a soft closing of consumers so that there is no point in which we are marketing, which we are promoting, where we are still trying to, of course, secure contracts with these clients. So it's a seamless process of capital ultimately being deployed. And ultimately, it's, of course, working capital that is returned on a monthly basis through contracts that these clients subscribe and pay to for the use of the solar solution. So in other words, the Stag INZ, of course, creates income linked models, which of course, generates a lot of more confidence in the investment because the investment is not milestone based. It's not a case of us holding and then waiting for returns to accumulate and then assessing after a certain period of time is done. It constantly is generating income on a monthly basis from these PPA contracts between each and every client and the operating company. Now, I've mentioned the shareholder loan, which is a major component of how the fund operates, but then there's also the equity position that we take up in each and every operating company that we invest with. This, of course, allows us to have a form of governance, transparency, in the overall structure and also allow us to act as a more of a value add partner in the total transaction. As Stag is of course, consists of investment analysts, valuation experts. We're very much able to add further value on the project, and then for optimized returns as a result. So we've been able to naturally blend our fund management skills and expertise with inline active investment that, of course, we manage effectively. So an investor has the opportunity really to join a fund that is performing extremely well in terms of returns. This is always a typical number that clients, of course, assess. We target 8% every single year, so this is on an annual basis. However, I can currently confirm, based on our deployments that we've already engaged in, we have been generating early teen double-digit returns. This has been, of course, a wonderful start to the fund, and the fund has raised, just by the way, in excess of 15 million euros. So it's an optimal time, definitely, for a subscriber to take advantage of this opportunity. And also, of course, the fact that ultimately you are contracting with the fund manager. We are the licensed regulated entity. So at the end of the day, from disclosing of information, from retrieving any form of financial forecastings or information that you require detailed to the investment, you can be sure that this is sound and proper in which we are delivering our results on.
That's very interesting. Now, what I'm curious though is I understand that there's a funding period for this fund, which is going to be coming up on February 22nd. Is that right?
Absolutely, Scott.
Which doesn't give a lot of time for somebody to be able to, get the ball rolling. Obviously, we've worked with other clients in the past, and just the bank account process of setting that up could take a month or two in some cases. So I'm curious how you would manage that if somebody wants to get involved in the fund. There's a short time frame in order to do so, but yet creating the bank account and everything else associated with that, well, it seems to take longer than that. How do you deal with those situations?
Yes, absolutely. No, very, very good question. So a couple of points on that I would like to make. So you did mention, yes, the 22nd of February 2026 is the fund close date. So that gives us just under 5 weeks now until that shuts. Just to also reiterate what the close date actually represents, it means that subscribers have to have subscribed, or investors have to have subscribed to the fund by registering their interest, by being onboarded by Stag in terms of going through the AML and due diligence processes, and then paying the relative subscription fee of the fund, which is 1% of the total capital in which you decide to invest. Just by the way, as well, on that note, the minimum threshold of investment in the INZ is 150,000 euros. So skipping along now to once you've paid the subscription fee. Once you've paid the subscription fee, you are able to participate in the fund. So what does that mean? From investing the principal capital amount, which is now required, you will have from the 22nd of February, 6 weeks to make this transfer. So it does not require you to make the full capital transfer by the 22nd of February. You just need to have registered your interest, have, of course, passed the due diligence checks and paid the subscription fee. That is the obligation that will be required from your end. Now, Scott, as you'd mentioned, of course, generally this process can be drawn out. It can be quite extensively long. This is very true. And this is mainly caused by the bank account that you need to open in your personal name as an investor in Portugal. However, we do have a solution, and the solution is a global custodian account. So if a client is not really willing to open or has challenges opening a bank account in their personal name in Portugal, they can simply make the capital transfer to our global custodian account. Us, as the fund manager, will be able to hold their participation units, because at the end of the day, the global custodian account is backed by a bank, which is BNI, of course, to make the process possible. And we will, in turn, hold your or custody your participation units, as opposed to if you opened your own Portuguese bank account, that Portuguese bank account would normally facilitate that role. So, and this, why I'm saying this is because all of that regulation would remain the same in principle. And then once you've made the transfer, we'd be able to allocate those funds into the respective investment. Now, this process can take anywhere from 5 to 7 working days in terms of when you initiate your interest. Send us obviously your relative KYC documents, and of course, make the subscription fee and the capital payment. So the entire process, we've had many examples of being able to wrap this up in 5 to 7 working days. So, in other words, there is plenty of time, but of course, we wouldn't want to take last minute risks. But that just gives you, I think, enough of an idea.
Yeah, that certainly solves that problem. I had no idea. So that's great. Now, I believe that the Golden Visa in general, it fits in a really interesting niche where a lot of people are coming under the D7 visa, which requires passive income. Not everyone has passive income. And the D8 visa is for salaries, and not everyone has, remote work, et cetera, et cetera. So this kind of fits in really well with those people that want to invest in money. And it's not about tying up your money for that amount of time because it returns a really nice yield every year as well. So it's one of those things that I think is a really great opportunity for a lot of people that don't necessarily want to relocate to Portugal full time, but they want to be able to have that option for when they want. Because as you said, I think it's 7 days a year or 2 weeks every 2 years. Is that right? And then
Correct,
after
correct.
that, they can spend as much time as they want. If they want to come over here full time as well, that's an option for them as well. And on top of that, I think it's good for not only themselves, but for their entire family. Is that right?
Absolutely. So a number of really, I would say, credible points there, Scott, because of course it gives clients that flexibility. And I think that's ultimately one of the main catches of the program. Clients have the ability to invest, of course, accrue relative returns, have the ability to participate in interesting projects, but they don't have the obligation to have extensive residency in Portugal. But if they want to, they can, as you'd mentioned. Of course, just typical to all different type of tax registrations and commitments. Once you go over 180 days, 183 days, then of course that will attract naturally tax residency. But that's something we won't obviously delve into, but naturally do have that opportunity. In addition, you can of course have freedom of movement in the EU, so you will be able to have that Schengen access. So that's another key characteristic that typically investors do look at and do very much enjoy that benefit of. And naturally, also just going on to the point about, of course, the Golden Visa, Stag Fund Management, the ecosystem, we look to really complement. And normally speaking as well, of course, having visas, PT that are as involved in that process can really centralize and make that much more efficient.
That's great. Well, thanks for all the information today, Nathan. It's been really insightful and informative. I really appreciate your time. I'm sure all the viewers watching this probably thinks the same thing as well. What can happen is anyone wants to get to talk to Nathan about his funds, if they can get in touch with the information provided down below, we'll get you in touch with him. And thanks again, Nathan.
Thank you very much for the time, Scott. It's been wonderful. And look forward to speaking soon and to any of you that come through. Lovely opportunity. Thank you.
Bye for now.